Thank you, Alice. Well, good morning, everyone. I don't think I've seen so many people on a Teams call for some time. So welcome, and welcome to the first of 3 Neurological Framework practice sharing sessions. Can I ask that you all mute your microphones throughout the presentations? It's really distracting with this number of people on a call that if you pick up any outside noise, that's really distracting for the speakers. So please keep your microphones muted throughout the presentations. And we ask that you turn your cameras on if possible, particularly during the breakout sessions. So good morning, everyone. My name is Stephanie Fraser. Somebody's still got to mute their microphone, I think. Thank you. And I chair the Scottish Government's National Advisory Committee for Neurological Conditions. And I'm delighted to be here chairing this event today. Today's event is all about shining a spotlight on some of the work funded through the Neurological Care and Support, a Framework for Action 2020 to 2025, which is its posh title. The Neurological Framework was published in December 2019 with a vision to ensure that people can access personalised care and support regardless of their condition or where they live. Over the past 3 years, Scottish Government has, since October 2020, awarded £2.1 million to 35 projects to improve patient care and support. These projects have been wide-ranging in terms of delivery, geographical areas and conditions covered. So today's event is about raising awareness of approaches taken to improving care for people with neurological conditions in Scotland, and to get others thinking about how they might link to these projects and enhance service delivery in their own areas. We want to look at ways to continue the conversation beyond these sessions, and we hope to provide opportunities to explore some of the work in more detail through appropriate networks. Now, today's session is focusing on supported self-management. Commitment 1 of the framework was to support shared decision-making and personalised models of care and support, including access to supported self-management where appropriate. Scottish Government colleagues will give a strategic overview of where we are, and we will hear briefly from 6 projects. I'm really sorry, we've only got 5 minutes to try and get everybody in, so I will be keeping you to time. I realise 5 minutes is extremely challenging, but this is meant to be a taster. And the organisations we'll hear from are all third sector organisations, but they rely on working with statutory partners, not only to encourage referrals, but for each of them, long-term sustainability is becoming more precarious. And so we need to have discussions about how we continue improvements in care. We will hear from the projects in 2 groups, and there will be an opportunity for your questions after each group. Once we've had both groups and both question and answer sessions, you'll be transported into breakout rooms by the wonders of MS Teams technology, where there will be an opportunity for further discussion. Obviously, you can unmute your microphones at that point. We'll then come together for a final summing up session before closing at 1 o'clock, just in time for lunch on time. But before we start, I would like to hand over to Alice Struthers, Programme Director of the Neurological Alliance of Scotland, who will highlight some of the findings from their recently published patient experience survey to give us an up-to-date lived experience context for today's session. So over to you, Alice.
Thank you, Stephanie. And hello, everyone. I'm delighted to be speaking here today at this first practice sharing event that we are co-hosting with the Scottish Government. To those who don't know us, the Neurological Alliance of Scotland is an umbrella organisation of neurological charities and voluntary groups covering over 30 different conditions. We were established in 2004, and in partnership with our members, we inform policy, raise awareness and support improvements in service. We aim to make sure that the experiences of people with neurological conditions and those around them are recognised. And I'm here to give you a short presentation on the key findings of our report, Together for the 1 and 6, which is based on the National Neurology Patient Experience Survey data and which we published in June this year. However, I noticed that this isn't the presentation that I sent in, John, so I'm not sure if you click next. There we go. That's perfect. So on to the next slide, please. So at the top of the slide, you can see the range of topics that were covered in the survey. This was the very first time we've been involved with the National Neurology Patient Experience Survey, and we're grateful to the Scottish Government for funding our part in the research. In Scotland, over 800 people responded to the survey. This breaks down to 784 adults and 50 children and young people. As we go through, you'll see a black figure and a white figure, black referring to adult data and white for children and young people. I only have about 4 minutes left, so this is going to be a whistle-stop tour of our findings, and I'll walk you through our three key themes: delays to treatment and care, crisis and mental health, and a lack of information and support. Next slide, please. The pandemic has had a negative impact on waiting times across all areas, but we know from conversations with our members that services asked about were experiencing delays well before the pandemic started. The majority of respondents, both adult and child, have experienced serious delays to treatment and care, but particularly concerning are delays impacting half of respondents in having a routine appointment with a neurologist, and over a third of adults and children experienced delays in receiving a diagnosis over the past 12 months. Part of the problem here is the low awareness in primary care of some of the rarer neurological conditions. Nearly a sixth of adults have waited over 18 months to see a specialist nurse or neurologist, and 53% of children have waited over 12 months for a wheelchair. Access to physio is a critical issue for people too, with nearly half of adults and over half of children experiencing long delays in accessing an appointment. Next slide, please. Why do we say there is a crisis in mental health? Well, 80% of adults and 95% of children say their neurological condition has had a negative impact on their mental health. 4 in 10 adults and 3.5 out of 10 children say their mental health needs are not being met at all. Over half of adults and nearly half of children have not been asked about their mental well-being at all in the last 3 years, and 57% of adults and 22% of children would welcome a referral to mental health support. Lack of support and a sense of abandonment is a common theme, and 44% of respondents said their mental health had worsened through the pandemic. As one person says, "How my mental health is still this good amazes me. I'm in charge of my own care with no support from any medical professional whatsoever." Someone else said, "After the movement disorder clinic, there is no other support. This is very difficult to manage, as I feel my mental health is probably worse than I realise." Next slide, please. Moving on to our third theme. Astonishingly, nearly a fifth of adults were given no explanation of their condition at diagnosis. This means that, that other than the name of their condition, the clinician failed to provide any explanation as to the cause, symptoms, prognosis, or treatment. One person said, "I was given a diagnosis of FND over the telephone during lockdown. I was told to look at a website which would explain it to me." A further 30% of adults and 38% of children were given no information about their condition. This refers to leaflets explaining the condition from the NHS or a charity, or being directed to a link providing information to an NHS website or a charity. Of those who received the information, a fifth of adults and a third of children rated it as poor. Someone said, "Nobody should ever leave the appointment with a neurologist with a diagnosis and an apology for having run out of leaflets about the condition. This impacted so much more on my mental health than if I'd had a written responsible source of information about the diagnosis and where to find more information. This impacted on me for years, and it is only now that I'm beginning to accept the diagnosis 7 years on." Next slide, please. It's estimated that 1 in 6 people in Scotland live with a neurological condition. There are an estimated 600 different neurological conditions. We all know someone who has a neurological condition, but we probably don't know the full truth about how they're managing. We would like to see shorter waiting times, equitable access to neurological care and support across Scotland, and a greater focus on mental health support going on. Thank you very much for listening to this presentation, and I'm now going to hand over to Richard Brewster, Senior Policy Manager for Neurological Conditions in the Clinical Priorities team at the Scottish Government.
Thanks, Alice. And John, if you could move on to the next slide. Thank you. So as Stephanie's already outlined, the Neurological Care and Support, a framework for action, it's a 5-year strategy, and it was launched at the end of 2019 with the vision for that everyone with a neurological condition will be able to access care and support they need to live well on their own terms. There are 5 very broad aims, as you can see from the diagram on the slide here, and sitting under those 17 more specific commitments that are around improving delivery of services. It's led by the Neuro team at Scottish Government, and it's overseen by the National Advisory Committee, which draws on expertise in delivering neurological services across Scotland, both in the third and statutory sector. And we are accountable to the Minister for Public Health, Women's Health and Sport, Marie Todd, and the framework comes with £4.5 million of funding over 5 years. Next slide, please, John. So you can see from the diagram here the range of conditions that we funded projects so far. We've had 3 rounds of funding with 2.1 million awarded for the 35 projects. So the 3 rounds were in October 2020, March 21 and March 22. And I'm pleased to say that the largest chunk of the diagram here, the orange chunk on the right, are projects that cover all neurological conditions. And that's not to say that some of the projects that funded towards specific conditions can't be at there are approaches that can potentially be rolled out to other conditions, and we're looking at that as we go on. We're currently undergoing a process of evaluation of round 1 and 2 projects, looking at the evidence that they've provided for change, looking at how that matches what they said they would do in their original applications. And the bullet pointed list here gives you a broad idea of the type of projects: digital self-management, supporting staff, patient information, and so on. No project fits neatly into one box, but that just gives you an idea of the sort of areas that projects have been funded to deliver. So for 2023 to 25, we're now looking to consolidate the impact of what we've done so far and to address any other identified gaps. Next slide, please, John. There are other areas within the framework that we are focusing on that are not through the funded projects. So the quality assurance of the HIS, we've commissioned Healthcare Improvement Scotland to develop a quality assurance self-evaluation tool, which is for organisations to look at how well they're meeting the 2019 general standards for neurological care. That's going to be launched early in 2023 and will be a really good tool for organisations to assess what they need to strengthen and what they're doing well. Information and resources, we are publishing a range of new or revised NHS Informed pages on neurological conditions. So I think there are around 9 at the moment, with 8 almost reaching finalisation quite soon. We've got information being developed in self-directed support and have published information on carers. Practice sharing, which is this session, forms part of a series of practice sharing approaches that we are going to be rolling out. Prevalence data has been much anticipated and will be published next week. That is going to be the most accurate prevalence data that we've had on neurological conditions in Scotland. And then work on care pathways being led by our colleagues in the Centre for Sustainable Delivery, and there's a big bit of work around workforce that we're developing at the moment. Next slide, please. And finally, just to tie this off, the Neuro Framework doesn't sit in isolation. There are a lot of other cross-cutting strategies and pieces of work within Scottish Government that feed into or will influence the way that services are delivered. So the National Care Service, getting it right for everybody, getting it right for everyone, I should say, mental health and wellbeing strategy being some examples of that, and the workforce strategy as well. So that's not an exhaustive list on the slide. So next slide, please, John. And this is where you can get more information. We've got a point progress report published in the summer, and a website with funded projects as well as the strategy itself. I'm now going to hand on to our first project presentation, which is Ailey Gallagher from NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde, who's going to talk about Parkinson's Connect.
Thanks, Richard. Thank you very much for having me. My name is Ailey Gallagher. I'm the Clinical Service Manager for Neurology Specialties within Greater Glasgow and Clyde. We've been working for the last 2 years with support of funding from the Scottish Government with Parkinson's UK, and really just trying to bridge that gap, as Alice kind of so well alluded to, that healthcare professionals are struggling to find the time to really give people and families living with neurological conditions the time and support that they really need to digest and to live well. So we've been working with Parkinson's Connect to try and bridge some of that gap. Next slide, please. Now, Parkinson's UK unfortunately aren't here today. This is just a very whistle-stop tour of what they do. So they kind of reach on average about 50,000 people per year. And we've spent the last year kind of edging into 2 years just working with them to build up kind of trust and relationships and between our clinicians and their teams. Next slides, please. So in collaboration with ourselves and other health boards throughout the UK, Parkinson's UK have been developing, as I said, and improving a new mechanism that seeks to engage individuals at the point of diagnosis to proactively engage and support. It's multifaceted. They have access to information, access to local services, local support groups, and they also have access to face-to-face support advisors as well, which is really quite pivotal in how we can support people to live well in between hospital appointments, and kind of put care back in people's own hands. One of the challenges that we found, as I said, that we find collectively, and again, Alice alluded to it, particularly for movement disorders, it is that lack of time and being able to have a really robust and holistic appointment, particularly following an initial diagnosis. So we found that this mechanism really bridges that gap and allows us a bit more comfort, just making sure that our patients have got access to support and are well cared for in the community between appointments. Next slide, please. So the referral mechanism for us has been very straightforward. I think one of the novel approaches that this has adopted is that it's not only patients that can be referred, you can also refer families, carers, support networks so that they can access information as well. It really does offer quite individualised wraparound care once a patient's referred. If they accept that referral, they can create their own individual profile and access information that's really pertinent to them and is important to them. The most commonly accessed support pages so far have been information on what Parkinson's is, what to do following what diagnosis, medications advice, and information on physical activity, which the team at PD UK in particular are quite keen on kind of trying to gear that up to better support people to live well longer term and potentially avoid some of the use of medications within the condition. Next slide, please. One of the biggest learning points that we've taken over the last couple of years is that actually, despite living in a digital world, whilst the digital information is very helpful to people and their families and carers around them, people are still seeking that face-to-face information and support. So that's something that PD UK have been very careful in their development. So that is still absolutely there. And actually, I think by and large, almost every person who has signed up for this mechanism has also asked for a face-to-face support advisor that's been provided by PD UK, which again just gives us as healthcare providers some assurances that there is a support network being built around individuals that are living well in the community. Next slide, please. I am cautious of time, so I'll run through this one quickly. This is just kind of initial background information for you. So there are 4 test sites currently working with Parkinson's at the minute, and they obviously plan to scale that up over the next year. So far within Greater Glasgow and Clyde, both the neurology and older people services have registered for the use of PD Connect, and that just kind of gives a breakdown and some information on how patients and families are choosing to engage with us. So you can see predominantly that's been via email in the first instance, and then people are obviously just engaging at their own free will with their devices at home. Next slide, please. This is just a summary, I think, of what PD Connect has meant to us as care providers within Greater Glasgow and Clyde. I'll let you peruse those kind of quotes by yourself. That's come from some of our clinicians. I think the most important thing for us has been that there's a relationship of trust there. We do know, as I said, that people are well cared for, that we are able, that this mechanism is able to bridge the gap between what we do and the support that's available in community for people. Support isn't just available via Parkinson's UK, it signposts people to support groups, local activity classes, singing, etc. All these mechanisms that are actually really, really supportive and enriching for people in their lives. And I think it's been a really rewarding process for us, and we have some more assurances that despite the pressures felt in amongst all the NHS clinical teams, that there are still people out there in that wider community providing some wraparound care. Next slide, please.
Ailey, just to let you know, you're on your 5 minutes.
There we go. Last slide. Information for Parkinson's Connect. It's Claire McNeil that's been leading on it from their perspective. So her email address is at the bottom of these slides, which I'm sure will be sent out. And that is all that I have on the dot. 5 minutes.
You are fantastic. Thank you very much, Ailey. I'm going to go straight on to Ian McWhirter from Revive MS.
Hi, good morning, everybody. My name's Ian, and Revive MS Support provides services and support to people affected by multiple sclerosis to help them manage the physical, emotional, financial and social impacts associated with the condition. We deliver these services predominantly from our centre at Govan in Glasgow, but realise there's an opportunity to reach those who are unable to access the centre for whatever reason. So our goal was to enable access to Revive's core MS support services for those who were unsupported or underserved, and try to spearhead that through local referrals nationwide and through digital platforms. So what we did was we developed a platform, an umbrella platform called Revive MS Connect. So another Connect. Next slide, please. So what we did, summary of that, we introduced a national coordinator role. This was essential to ensure promotion of the service and was aimed to ensure that MS nurses and health and social care professionals understood the benefits to patients and linked them into the services that we could provide. We chose to focus on our core services of counselling, support from our MS specialist nurse, speech and language therapy and physiotherapy. These were the services that were most often used by our clients, but also those which could most readily be adapted and delivered digitally. Both as one-to-one, for example, consultations and informations with our MS nurse, but also for group activities such as mindfulness. In terms of promotion, we presented at the Scottish MS Nurse Academy, but also aimed to achieve direct contact with health and social care professionals and other MS stakeholders across Scotland. So, for example, specialist networks such as neurological rehabilitation specialists, for example, PDRU in Glasgow, but other examples include active liaison with Midlothian Health and Social Care Partnership on their Neurological Conditions project, and establishing links with MS stakeholders in Tayside, Grampian, Orkney and Highlands. One key aspect was making sure that we introduced integrated data collection into our electronic patient record system. This was obviously key to enable us to record the necessary data for monitoring and evaluation purposes. Next slide, please. So what did we achieve? Well, so far we have had 374 clients across Scotland who've received 1,291 interactions. An intervention can be one of a few things, for example, a one-to-one consultation or completed group participation, for example, across the range of services like counselling, nurse assessments and reviews, speech and language therapy and physiotherapy. During the project, we've achieved our intended outcomes. We've measured this through feedback from clients, so they're kind of listed there. Unexpected outcomes, we found there was a Scotland-wide demand for welfare and benefits support, and we've been enabled to complete digital representation at benefits appeals and tribunals. I suppose given the economic challenges faced by people at the moment, this is actually quite understandable. There is a lack of readily available and quick local provision around financial support, and we are able to offer that within a timescale that's not necessarily achieved throughout the country. So an example of the wider progress is probably best described in a short case study. We had a 32-year-old female who was diagnosed with MS 8 years ago and lived out with our natural catchment area with her partner, who's also her sole carer. She was referred to Revive MS Connect by her local MS nurse, who's only able to see her every 6 months due to local resource limitations. Received an initial assessment from our specialist nurse via Teams, and this resulted in a co-produced care plan incorporating counselling for both herself and her partner to tackle the mental health challenges triggered both by the impact of MS on both of their lives. We were enabled to provide welfare and benefits support. Both had become unemployed as a result of her MS and his caring responsibilities. one-to-one physiotherapy to address pain and mobility issues, and onward referral to our local GP for continence support. All of this was fed back to the MS nurse just to make sure that our local services were completely kept in the loop. This was followed by a 3-month review, again using a digital channel, during which the client and her partner both highlighted the extent of the benefit they'd received from accessing support on a virtual basis. Next slide, please.
Ian,
So,
just to let you know, your 5 minutes is.
That's fine. Yeah, very quick. Next slide, please. So yeah, our next steps are we are looking to embed digital service delivery, looking to work more collaboratively, for example, with the MS Society's Wellbeing Hub, and develop further live streaming of our existing services. And for any more information, then please feel free to contact myself or Revive through any of those channels. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. And might I say, both you and Ellie have been wonderful at keeping to time. Really, really appreciate it. Shirley, I'm going to introduce you to Shirley Maxwell from Epilepsy Connections. The pressure's on you to keep to time too. I'll come in after 5 minutes.
I'll do my best to be brief. First of all, thank you for the opportunity to talk about the Counselling Partnership project today. So why counselling and why this partnership? Well, 1 in 3 people with epilepsy has a lifetime history of psychiatric disorders. Most commonly diagnosed are depression and anxiety, and the suicide rate is much higher, estimated to be 3 times higher in people with epilepsy than the general population. SIGN Guideline 143 on the diagnosis and management of adults with epilepsy recommends that treatment of anxiety and depression should be considered as part of a multidisciplinary approach to treatment. That guideline is now 8 years old, and there are no statutory services in Scotland available to address the specific mental health needs of people with epilepsy. As everybody here knows, access to generic mental health services, including counselling, is limited and subject to ever-increasing waiting times. So it would be fair to say that the mental health needs of people living with epilepsy are well recognised, but largely unmet. And of course, on top of all of these additional issues with depression and anxiety, people affected by epilepsy have all the same life issues that could cause anyone to seek support. So why this partnership approach? Epilepsy Connections in our own small way and Lanarkshire Epilepsy in their own small way provided limited in-person counselling services for years. The key disadvantages of these models were that they were only available to people who could attend in person. Of course, the pandemic changed that very quickly. We switched to remote delivery in March 2020. By December 2020, things were going well, and we realised that a remote model could allow us to offer counselling to more people. We knew that working with partners in other parts of the country who don't work would help us to do that. And we also knew that working with partners who already have links with local people with epilepsy meant that we were offering additional support to people who were already linked in. So we invited Quarriers Epilepsy Outreach and Lanarkshire Epilepsy to test this model and found out if remote counselling would be attractive to people with epilepsy, cost effective to deliver, and scalable. So here's what we did. You've already had the chance to look at this slide. We set up a 12-month pilot project offering remote counselling on Zoom, WhatsApp and video call. We had a referral pathway that came via community-based epilepsy outreach teams, and I really need to emphasise the importance of that for this model. It was really critical because it allowed us to offer a much safer service if we knew that people who were coming in for counselling had already had practical issues like managing seizures, being linked to a specialist team, having your benefits sorted out. That was all dealt with by the time they came for counselling, and at the other end of counselling they could be referred back to their local source of help for social support or to get involved in volunteering. anything that we could do to help maintain that peak of well-being that hopefully counselling had taken them to. We assessed all referrals using Core 10, which is a commonly used standardised measure. We were able to refer people that we were very concerned about straight to their GP or back to their epilepsy specialist. We provided access to connectivity and devices, and also we offered some coaching to people who needed it. Every client was offered 8 counselling sessions. Some people were offered more if they needed it, and our team of counsellors, who comprised accredited and qualified counsellors and also trainees, used an integrative approach. So that's person-centred, psychodynamic and CBT models. And we also evaluated the project in May 2022. Could I have the next slide, please, John? So here's what happened. We were able to offer counselling, or deliver counselling, in fact, to 43 people in 5 health board areas. So that was 40% more than we thought we would achieve. The survey feedback, which was part of the evaluation, showed that 76% of respondents felt that they had more control over their lives. Control is a really critical issue for a lot of people who have the unpredictability of living with seizures, and 65% of people said that they felt a lot less hopeless than they did before. You can see the comments there from people who underwent counselling. I feel more confident, I feel a bit more positive, to it has changed my life completely, to a number of people who said that they thought this was an essential service that was part of the treatment. The partnership was also a success. The 3 partners are now involved in another 2 service delivery projects and a more strategic project. Could I have the next slide, please,
Shirley,
John?
That's your 5 minutes.
Okay. You can see it there. If anybody would like to find out more about the project, please get in touch with me.
Thank you, Shirley. Now, that's the first group of projects that we've literally heard a brief canter through. So we now have an opportunity for discussion and question and answer. So I don't know, John, could you remove the stop sharing so that I can see? Thank you. So that I can see if people put their hands up. Does anybody have any questions that they want to put to any of the projects we've just heard, or Alice about the Neurological Alliance work, or Richard about the Scottish Government's work? If I can be chair's prerogative and ask Ailey a Parkinson's question, I really like the example of the text that was sent out on diagnosis to direct people to Parkinson's UK. Who sent that text? Was that a Parkinson's UK text, or was that the clinician?
So that's a Parkinson's UK text, Stephanie. Basically, at the point of clinic, Parkinson's UK will be offered to anybody receiving a new diagnosis, and they'll be asked how they want to engage, whether that's email, text, or a phone call, and they'll subsequently receive a sort of referral prompt via Parkinson's UK within a few days, via their preferred sort of contact mechanism.
Thank you. Mary Ramsey, you have your hand up.
Yes, I have a question. The condition I have is essential tremor. Now, the problem we have is it was hidden behind Parkinson's for many, many years. And it's trying to get the information out to the general public, because they automatically see a hand and a head tremor and think it's Parkinson's. And I was wondering if there was anyone that can give me some advice and help as to how I go about getting that out there.
Mary, I'm not sure that's within the remits of the. I think it's a really, really good question, but I think I'm going to pass that on back to the Neurological Alliance to help you signpost, because I think this is about questions about the projects or about the 1 in 6 report or the Scottish Government's framework delivery. I'm just looking to see if anybody else has got any questions or comments, but Mary, I think Alice, if Alice can pick that up with you and maybe signpost to a conversation offline, that would be helpful. Thank you. Maggie.
Hi, yeah, I think it's fascinating to hear all three of those presentations were about probably increasing people's access or making it much easier for people to access things through a digital forum, even though we're not. So we're talking about self-management here. My question is if any of the three presenters came across any barriers to people accessing that. I mean, particularly actually Shirley, I'm wondering about, and Ian, in terms of people accessing if they had the right Wi-Fi and equipment, or if there was any support that was needed for people to access the services.
Yeah, I can link into that. Yeah, we did find that people with more advanced MS really kind of struggled with the technology side of it. So anecdotally, we've heard that only potentially about 20% of people with more advanced MS have got the dexterity and ability to be able to actually use digital products well enough to be able to receive the services that we provide. So it's something which, yeah, we need to look at in terms of future service provision.
Does anybody else want to comment on that? Any of the other, Ailey or Shirley?
Yes, I wouldn't mind. We, from the start of pandemic restrictions, we were working with certainly some of our own service users to make sure that they had devices and connectivity. When it came to counselling, there was a few issues. There was actually fewer issues than we expected about getting the connectivity or the devices. Some people benefited from a wee bit of coaching, so maybe a couple of trial runs with staff who weren't the counsellors, just to set up the calls and manage the calls. There were other barriers though, and one of the problems was that people couldn't always be sure of a confidential space in their own home to complete a counselling session.
Stephanie, you have your hand up.
Yeah, so my question was for Ian. I was just wondering, with the Revive MS Connect, with the list of people counselling MS nurse, I was wondering if you've ever worked with occupational therapists.
We don't, well, not directly within Revive. Occupational therapy isn't a service that we currently provide. It's something which we'll certainly be looking at over the next 12 months. So what we tend to do is signpost out to external providers at that point. It's not a service that we directly provide.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask another question? Because there aren't. I can't see a hand up. Oh, actually, has somebody got their hand up that I'm not calling?
Yes, Stephanie, sorry to interrupt here, but there's two people have their hands up, James Magra and Brian Davies.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, because I can't see everybody on the call because there are so many. So James and then Brian.
Good afternoon. Thank you ever so much. No, just a brief question in regards to the 1 in 6 report. Obviously, the issues that our patient and client groups have in accessing the kind of medical support that they have is important, but and obviously the fantastic work that's been demonstrated in the projects this afternoon in regards to the non-statutory sectors. It's just about the thoughts on how do we inform our patient and clients that, you know, it isn't just the medicalised and statutory models that are so important, because obviously the feedback that your survey did on the patient's approaches obviously kind of highlights the desire for that very statutory medicalised model.
Yeah, I think that's a very good question, and I think it all just comes down to ensuring that the GPs have got the information from the third sector that they're happy to hand out and promote and give to people in terms of signposting on people to charities who've got the experience in that condition. as part of it.
Hello, I'm Brian. I'm an occupational therapist in Edinburgh. It was just from what Ian was saying. With Edinburgh, we've got a specialist occupational therapist, which is me, who works with individuals to support access to technology. So if they are struggling because of their kind of condition, we can go out and do an assessment, trial equipment. So those services are now starting to kind of get developed. I know there's also one in East Lothian as well. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Brian and James. I'm just checking that there are no more hands up. And I think people are putting in the chat, there are specialist OT services in different areas. So please look at the chat. Right, I think we're now on to the second cohort of our presentations. So I would like to call on Ross Grieve from Thistle Health and Wellbeing to tell us about the Neurological Wellbeing Service. Ross, over to you. And I will come in after 5 minutes.
Thanks and good afternoon, everybody. Next slide, John. We'll just move this on. So Thistle developed and delivered a remote self-management programme for people in Fife living with a neurological condition. Our belief and hope to test was that we've got a model which is potentially cost-effective and scalable in that it adopts a generic non-condition focus. So we focus on the person living with any neurological and or comorbidities by adopting an outcome-focused and strength-based approach. Thistle have had a 7-year history of working in Fife with the Personal Outcomes Programme team delivering training and consultancy support. So with that team and Parkinson's UK Fife branch, they supported us to develop a referral network, which included establishing a data sharing agreement with the NHS. So once we had that established, we moved to deliver what was predominantly a one-to-one coaching and or group-based set of supports to people. Now, laterally towards the end of the programme, we have in fact established a physical presence in Fife as well, because GP practice has hosted 2 of our wellbeing practitioners. So we do in fact accept referrals and deliver face-to-face work as well now. Next slide, John. At point of referral, our target was to reach out to people within 1 week of receiving referral and subject to availability of the person to then try to meet them within 4 weeks of that referral. The outcome-focused approach would have us offering the time and space for people to share their story, which is usually a story of how living with health difficulties has impacted in their life in that holistic sense. And we use that story to negotiate with people realisable outcomes, that if we assumed we were working well with people, that we'd have a good reasonable expectation that they would in fact making a significant move towards the outcomes that they set for themselves. We then adopted the strength-based approach, which would have us focusing on people's already existing knowledge and self-management skills, and then negotiating with the person a plan, which usually involves layering in other sources of support. So the 2 dominant models of support we offered was the one-to-one coaching and or attendance at our lifestyle management courses, and then we also connected people with other sources of local support as well. Next slide there, John. So we worked with 82 people over the time frame of the project, which was an 87% engagement rate, which we believe strongly correlates with that focus we had of immediately connecting people at that point of referral and making that first point of contact within that 4 weeks. Our average number of sessions per person were 6, and we ran 4 courses in this time, one of which we're still completing, which is a face-to-face course working from the GP practice in Methil. Next slide again, John. There was 2 dominant themes that we've seen come through this project. One is around accessibility. So we're hearing routinely that people wish they'd have this kind of support years ago and or at the time of diagnosis, as it would have prevented a lot of psychosocial issues entrenching into people's life, which made it then difficult to recover from. And the other theme we notice is an identity theme, where people start to give us indication that they're reclaiming themselves and their identity, and they're not just somebody who lives with a diagnosis now. And next slide again, John. We correlated the qualitative narratives we collated with quantitative scores. So we used the WEMWEBs, the Warwick Edinburgh Wellbeing Score, to take pre and post scores. Now, 70% of people that we initially engaged with had extremely low wellbeing scores, which was indicative of probable clinical depression. And although we are not a diagnostic service, we were attentive to that, and yet noticed an appreciable change in that score post support, which is still lower than the population average, but it seemed to correlate well with people demonstrating and describing to us significant stories of change. So if you look at the next slide as well, we used scaling tools to try to capture in a simple way the type of changes people were describing to us. So we used 3 of them, which was a goal attainment scale, the extent to which people were moving towards the outcomes that they set for themselves, confidence scales, and coping. Now, in each of those scales, on average, people were moving from a 3 out of 10 to a 7 out of 10 score, which correlates well with the type of stories that we were hearing people describe. And next slide.
Ross, that's your 5 minutes.
Yeah, so our next steps really is we're going to continue the work we're delivering in Fife and also support that transition to having more of a physical presence. So the GP practice that we're working with is offered to connect us to other practices so we can develop our referral pathway there. And final slide there is we'll have a report up you can connect into and connect in with my colleague if you've got further questions. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ross. And now over to Quarriers Lifestyle Management. Sam Begbie from Quarriers.
Yeah, hello, thank you very much.
Over to you. And the same format, I'll let you know when your 5 minutes is up.
Thank you, perfect. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to speak today. My name's Sam Begbie. I'm the Supported Self-Management Project Worker. For this project, the title is Living Well with Epilepsy, and it's in the William Quarrier Scottish Epilepsy Centre, which is an independent hospital operated by health and social care charity Quarriers, providing unique epilepsy services to patients and clinicians around Scotland. So next slide, please. So how did we come up with the idea? Just a wee bit of background. So people with epilepsy are more likely to experience emotional and social difficulties, and this is often more disruptive than their seizures. The people who visit the hospital represent the most vulnerable people in Scotland with epilepsy and stay with us for a prolonged period, around 4 weeks. So we wanted to find a way to make use of this access and time with individuals to talk to them about more than just their seizures and explore whether we could work together with them to make meaningful changes in their lives. The aim was to embed an ethos of supported self-management within the charity's existing culture and services, and also to develop a pilot model in collaboration with stakeholders for a supported self-management service, which increased the resilience and confidence of people with epilepsy to self-manage. So what did this look like then? We looked at pre-admission information. So we looked to clarify and imbue our paperwork with self-management language so that people were as ready as possible to make changes. We had staff training and culture. So we worked with staff to build on knowledge of person-centered practice and self-management principles. We had one-to-one solution-focused coaching, and also in-house self-development program where we had workshops and activities around living well with epilepsy. Also, we looked at post-discharge support. So that was linking people with community resources, and we also held 2 10-week lifestyle management courses, which were held in connection with our project partners, the Thistle Foundation. Next slide. So some information about what we managed to do. So overall, we've worked with 70 service users so far through stakeholder engagement, one-to-one coaching, lifestyle management, and the self-development programme. People have said things like the service gave them the building blocks for something new, feel more free, able to do things. The course taught me about small steps and setting goals, was encouraging. We also used WEMWebs as a before and after measure for our one-to-ones and our lifestyle management courses. And we found that as a result of the lifestyle management course, the average improvement of individual score was 9.1, which is an equivalent to 23% average increase in individual score, and this ranged from scores of 1 to 23 increase. So we also engaged with all the staff in the Epilepsy Centre through solution-focused training, also bite-sized training messages that we sent out to the whole staff team. We also implemented a what matters to you question to the admission paperwork, which is used for all inpatients and by all the nursing staff. And we've formed a supported self-management staff development group as well. And the staff have said things like, following on from COVID, there wasn't anything running in the centre. So having the opportunity for patients to access activities and education while they're here is really making a difference. And the what matters to you question really gets to the heart of what's going on for a person at the time. It is a positive change in the centre, which will have longevity. Next slide, please. So the next steps are, we'll review with the stakeholders. We'll complete our evaluation and final report, and then we'll have a celebration and dissemination event, and then hopefully continue the project and look to develop access to digital solutions as well with further funding. And then next slide again, please. So if you want to know more, just feel free to contact myself or Dr. Ian Campbell via email, or give the centre a call and ask for us. There's a link to our website, and there should be some information on there and a video capturing people's experiences of lifestyle management. Yeah, just feel free to get in touch. So thanks very much for listening.
Thank you, Sam. You're spot on 5 minutes according to my timer, so fantastic. So another 3 great gallop through 3 great projects. So now back to, if I can go back to the, oh, sorry, I'm so sorry. I've got Karen, and I'm jumping ahead of myself because Sam was so good at sticking to 5 minutes. My apologies. We have MS Mid-Argyll, and we have Karen McCurry.
Hi there. So you've got room for a little one.
No, it's all right. No, I'm just resetting my timer for 5 minutes. So I'm so pleased that we were on time. So over to you, Karen, to hear about your Lifeline services.
Thank you very much. So we'll just move on to, I've been introduced, we'll just move on to the next slide and we'll just get started. Okay, so the results of the Neurological Alliance survey were difficult reading, and they were echoing the experiences of our members with neurological conditions who, without our support, say they would feel alone as they were distressed at the lack of statutory support in Argyll. These feelings can lead to decline in mental well-being. So we're not a substitute for medical support. Our aim is to be the voice of those who often feel unheard. We're supporting them to take control of the management of their own conditions, enabling them to live fuller, healthier, happier lives. More people than ever are needing the support we offer across Mid-Argyll, Kintyre, Islay, Jura and beyond. The funding received enabled us to build on our strong foundations, develop our services, increase the number and variety of activities offered weekly, and extend our reach by establishing a hybrid delivery model, enabling people to connect with us both face-to-face and digitally for all the activities. We're supporting around 300 people. We've also, oh, sorry, slides moved. We've also extended our outreach project, which covers remote mainland and island areas, to include a second full-time member of staff to visit people in their own homes more locally who cannot make the journey to our centre or connect digitally. The work of the outreach team impacts the whole family, not just the person with the neurological condition. We've got 88 families now receiving outreach support, and strong, trusting relationships have been formed. During the pandemic, our outreach worker was often the only person outside of a person's family that they engaged with. Next slide, please. So our work is an example of how the third sector can respond rapidly and successfully to challenging circumstances. We can be very flexible, we're used to adapting, we're used to being resourceful. We're just a small team, we've only got 3 full-time members of staff and 1 part-time, but our reach is far and offer and our impact is positive. We creatively evaluate and use person-centred resources to help better identify needs, helping those we support to make informed choices, enabling more control in their lives. So next slide, please. Okay, I'm going to introduce 2 of our members. So we've got Polly, who was diagnosed 10 years ago with Parkinson's disease. Polly started coming to the centre after moving closer into town earlier this year following the death of her husband. It was a daunting but necessary move. She was feeling isolated and lonely, and the move from her more rural location was to help her engage with more people and make new friends. We knew that Polly was an artist, and we thought that maybe she would enjoy some of our arts and crafts sessions. However, when we asked what mattered most to her, Polly said she wanted to improve her balance and her strength and be able to socially interact with women of a similar age. Polly then joined her chair-based exercise classes and her giraffe healthcare physio group. After a few months, Polly announced to the class she had a new trick, and with a big smile, she got up and balanced on her tiptoes. This was the first time she'd managed to tiptoe in 10 years. So now on to Jack, who's 26 and he has autism. And during lockdown, Jack and his dad would come to our outside food share, mostly for a chat. We learned then that Jack had a special interest in learning about allergies and medical conditions. As Jack met more people, his interest in long-term health conditions developed. He was fascinated that a condition such as MS affected people in so many different ways. We taught Jack more about MS using our scientific educational resource, Digestion Science. Jack then trained as an ambassador to help us at our Digestion Science events. Jack is an asset to the MS Centre. He is open about his autism and he makes others feel comfortable when talking about their conditions. By coming to the centre, Jack is learning new skills and improving his own health and well-being. He attends our physio class, our participatory photography session, arts and crafts, chair-based exercises and sporting memory sessions. Jack moved to Argyll 3 years ago. His engagement in the centre has helped him feel healthier and happier and included in our community. Next slide, please. Our next step is to run a campaigning project to help decision makers and service providers, including us, better understand the needs of people in rural communities living with neurological and other long-term conditions, and explore ways as a community we can best support anyone feeling isolated and lonely to live their best lives. To do this, we will use participatory photography to empower those we support to tell their own stories while being treated fairly, with respect and without discrimination and or prejudice. We will focus on continuing to extend our reach, breaking down remaining barriers that still prevent some accessing support. An example of the participatory photography, the photo of the goalpost here. It was viewed and the information we got from the person was, I was like that, a broken goalpost. I am no longer like that. I am standing up again. Next slide, please. Thank you so much for listening. Please follow us on social media, Facebook, Instagram and Twitter.
Thank you so much, Karen. That's bang on 5 minutes. So thank you everybody for presenting those 3 projects. We've now got question and answer. George, you've got your hand up. George Allen.
So a question for Ross, really, and maybe a follow-up for Karen. Ross, you didn't give any indication of the range of neurological conditions that you dealt with in Fife. Can you cover more of that?
Yeah, I can. We work predominantly with people with stroke, MS, Parkinson's, and then we have a range of people living with what we might call rare neurological conditions, which we were delighted with because our ambition is to develop a generic service that has that reach and inclusivity. But it was dominated by more well-known neuro conditions.
Yeah, yeah. I think I'd like to make contact with you about a specific condition. Okay, thank you.
I'm sure, George, that Scottish Government colleagues are very happy to put people in touch with various projects. So if that's the case, it'll be picked up from these sessions. We have Mary and then Gail. Mary? I think Mary may have frozen on us. Gail, do you want to come and ask your question and we can try and get back? Mary's lost her connection, I think.
Great, thank you. All the presentations are really great and it's good to see these projects more in the central belt. I'm based in Dumfries and Galloway, working in primary care, and I was just wondering if there's a resource available just to have these contacts for the third sector so that we can signpost patients more locally.
I don't know whether Scottish Government colleagues want to comment on that, but there is a website, a Scottish Government website that has links to these projects. Richard, do you want to pick up on that?
Yeah, absolutely. We're trying to get people linked up as much as we possibly can, and you can include the projects you're interested in linking with in the evaluation form at the end. But as Stephanie says, that we are including all the information on how to contact the projects on our website, and links to where you can get further information on them.
Thank you. Mary, I think you're...
Yes.
You want to come in now? Yeah.
Yes. I think all the projects are excellent, but what we need to do is get more mental health people on the go, because with any neurological condition, you can feel isolated, and in my own case, I felt a freak, and I had a CPN, oddly enough. It was one of the rare ones, had one for 26 years, and just talking to somebody that didn't know about the neurological condition helped me a lot more than any pills or anything. So
I think that's well said, Mary. Well said. And I think you're being applauded in the chat for this. Did you have a question for anybody? Or
no, just basically keep on doing what you're doing and try and get some more.
Well, your mental health. I mean, so many projects today focused on mental health, well-being, and holistic support and the importance of that.
Yes.
Now, I think we're going to experience the wonders of Teams and be put into breakout groups for the next 10 minutes or so. So Alice, is that you that's going to put us all? Each group will have before we just go, each group will have a facilitator. We have 3 questions that we want feedback on. What can we take from these projects that will improve the way we work in our own areas? How do we embed and adopt these approaches in the longer term? And are there approaches to improving neurological services within your own areas that you could feed into the discussions that we've had today? So there'll be a facilitator in each room taking notes. You've got up to 10 minutes, no more, and then you'll be brought back in and we'll have a feedback session to hear how it's gone. Okay, Alice, over to you and Lorna to put us in our breakout rooms.
Here we go.
Sorry, apologies to my room. My room said I said we still had some time left, so, so that was rather unexpected for our room. But welcome back, everybody. Are we all back, Lorna? Is that everybody back?
Well, there's quite a few people who've left the meeting and just rejoining now. So I think that's now everyone back in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okie dokes. Well, I hope you all had a good discussion. We were just sort of getting into it, but thank you for your participation in the breakout rooms and welcome back. So I'm now going to go around the facilitators to feedback briefly on what each room discussed. So Maggie, do you mind if I start with you to let us know?
Absolutely fine. Definite recognition that the projects that we've heard today were so interesting, and I think there's a lot that we can take from each of them. What we can take from the projects to improve the way we work is just that emphasis on the holistic approach is important, how mental health is a theme right throughout, but good mental health is holistic, and the importance of person-centred goals as well. Also, we talked about how useful some of the outcome measures were that people used, and they seemed really accessible, so that's a really good take home from that. Really important theme around partnership and collaboration, which is so important across services, third sector and statutory services, really, really important. We talked about how do we embed and adopt these approaches long term. I'm not sure we have the answer to that, but I think it's a question that really needs to be focused on. So the sustainability is really important. So is this model where we have a range of things going on, which are projects which might change depending on whether they're funded or not, or should we be looking at a national approach where we're bringing these strands together, and how do we do that? So it's a question back to Scottish Government and everybody else. Also talking about how the pathway needs to be quite simplified. So busy clinicians, if things are changing and we don't know if a project is still ongoing, we need to maybe again have some kind of central resource that we look at and we know where these projects are. So the signposting and the pathway is really important, but quite difficult for clinicians sometimes on the ground. We didn't come up with any wonderful projects in our own areas. I think we just talked about the fact that it was so important to have these self-management tools that as clinicians people can signpost to, because they do provide that additional information. Very busy in clinic, they provide that coverall, and we're just so glad to hear about those pockets of really good practice that are happening today. And we wondered about how, you know, the focus on making some of these projects national, because some of them are national, some of them are maybe able to be rolled out nationally. So how do we embed that on a more national sense and get some equity for access across? So that was us.
Thank you, Maggie. Richard Brewster, do you want to talk about give us feedback on your group, anything in addition to Maggie's
no, I mean, the themes were very similar. And my apologies, first of all, to Heather Hardy, who's making a very useful point and then got cut off mid-flow. So Heather, very happy for you to include that in the chat. Yeah, I mean, I think mental health was a big focus for us, better links with the statutory sector, the holistic approach, and also the signposting and the networking. So Ian Campbell, who works both with Quarriers and the NHS, made the point that NHS clinicians don't always know what's out there that they can refer on to. So I think that feeds into the point that Maggie was making around signposting. So very high consistency.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you, Richard. Anissa, you were facilitating in your room. Can you feedback additional points? And
yeah, so I mean, I think again there was a highlighting the importance of partnership working. Our statutory guests were impressed at the range of kind of third sector services that were out there for support. For other particular points, there's a point about using better using tech support to help catch up with seeing patients and people post-COVID. So I think it's specialist nursing staff, etc., sometimes struggling to get back in to see everybody, you know, visits and things like that. So there's a desire to kind of look at how some of the technology being used in the projects to see how that might help, and possibly the kind of virtual consulting guidance as well. And also just a comment that this was a really helpful forum. that having somewhere where you can put faces to names in terms of doing that when you're hearing about the practice sharing was really helpful. So I kind of thought around a practice sharing kind of network or forum going forward.
Brilliant, thank you, Anissa. And I was obviously facilitating in my room. Apologies to we got cut off very abruptly, like Richard's room, and came back. So please follow up anything that we have missed. Our room also appreciated the outcome measures, and how can we work to have more consistency of outcome measures? Could we agree standard outcome measures for all neuro conditions to present our evidence? We really liked giving information at diagnosis, so in a simple way as the text in the Parkinson's Connect project, so that people can access that support when they choose to and not in a clinical setting. One of our statutory colleagues made the comment that it was good to know there was such a wraparound safety net that exists out with hospital walls, that can act as a holistic approach and advocates for people. But then we had a discussion about the precarious nature of that safety net existing, and that if third sector support isn't valued and sustained, it just won't be there. So then we started to talk about what can Scottish Government do to help us, and the hub support and the sharing so that we can connect people and people know what's out there. That came up in our group. Actually, people felt that Scottish Government should be more forceful about who should be doing what, and what good practice looks like, and how do we share that. We discussed that there are challenges around information sharing and Scottish Government, data sharing, and we all are kind of doing the same thing in our little silos. And could Scottish Government make it easier for us to share data or to share information, so we're not too much replication? We also don't want to push against each other. We felt that Scottish Government could offer support and connectivity so that one person's targets might jam up against somebody else's and not be helpful. So I think that is, I'm very conscious of the time of the meeting, and I'm getting little messages to say that our time together is nearly up. But I think certainly our group, and I've heard back from the breakout rooms, felt that this was a very important forum, and it was wonderful to have everybody from the different sectors, geographical areas, different conditions here today. I think that's really, really special. I want to thank our facilitators. I want to thank all of those who have presented on the projects today. They've been amazing. It was wonderful to see how responsive they've been to individual needs. Today was just a taster. I know that it was extremely challenging to keep to time, but I hope we've managed to facilitate some interest and introductions and further thought and actions. And our Scottish Government will continue to support engagement between third sector and statutory partners, but we have to work together to promote the benefits of these models of service delivery. In terms of next steps, there will be an evaluation form circulated to all of you after today's event. It's really important, please fill it in and send it back to us, because this feedback will not only allow you to highlight specific things that Scottish Government colleagues can signpost you to, or introductions that they can follow up or make, it will also provide us with very important information about how to run future sessions for other funded projects. We've mentioned the Scottish Government Neurological website covering this area of work. Ewan has already put the link to that up in the chat. And all that remains then for me to do now is to thank you all again for attending. It's been fantastic to have you as part of this today. I look forward to seeing what happens next and how we can work together to absolutely fulfill our aim to make a real difference for people living with neurological conditions in Scotland. And we've come in on time. Have a lovely lunch break if you're getting one. And I will now officially draw this event to a close. Thank you all for being with us today. Thank you.
Thank you.